She worked cleaning his penthouse until the mafia boss realized she was running from someone. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, expensive hush, revealing the private foyer of the penthouse on the 50th floor. Elena Cruz stepped out, her grip tightening on the handle of her cleaning caddy. The air up here was different. It smelled of ozone, polished marble, and a faint, lingering trace of sandalwood that she had come to associate with the owner of the apartment, Dante Moretti. Elena checked her watch. It was 2 in the afternoon. She had exactly 4 hours before the master of the house was scheduled to return. Efficiency was her armor. Silence was her shield. She moved into the main living area, a cavernous space dominated by floor-to-ceiling glass walls that offered a panoramic view of Ravello City. The city looked peaceful from this height, a grid of gray and silver under the autumn sun. But Elena knew better. Down there, in the shadows of the alleyways and the neon-lit corners, the world was messy and dangerous. Up here, in the glass and marble kingdom of Dante Moretti, everything was cold, hard, and pristine. She pulled her headphones from her pocket and placed them over her ears. The cord dangled into her apron pocket. Unconnected to any device, there was no music playing. She needed to hear if the elevator engaged or if the service door opened. But the headphones served a specific purpose. They discouraged conversation. They signaled to the few other staff members, the personal chef, the occasional assistant, that she was in her own world. They made her invisible. Elena began her routine in the library. She worked with a meticulous, rhythmic precision, dusting the mahogany bookshelves, polishing the brass lamps, wiping down the heavy oak desk. She avoided the security cameras instinctively. She knew exactly where they were located, one in the corner of the ceiling, one disguised within a motion sensor by the door. She moved in their blind spots whenever possible, keeping her head angled down, her hair acting as a curtain to obscure her profile. It was a habit born of survival, not shyness. Rumors about Dante Moretti floated through the cleaning agency like dust motes in a sunbeam. Some said he was an importer of fine wines. Others whispered that he owned half the construction firms in the state, the darker rumors, the ones that made the other cleaning girls giggle nervously in the break room, claimed he was the head of the Moretti crime family, a man whose word was law in the underworld of Ravello. Elena did not care what he was. She only cared that he paid the agency well, that the security in his building was impenetrable, and that he was rarely home. She moved to the living room, setting up a tall ladder to reach the high floating shelves that displayed abstract sculptures. The silence of the apartment was heavy, broken only by the hum of the central air conditioning. She climbed the ladder, a microfiber cloth in hand, stretching to reach a speck of dust on a twisted bronze figure. The elevator chimed. The sound was soft, but in the quiet apartment, it struck Elena like a gunshot. She froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was only 3 in the afternoon. He was not supposed to be here. The heavy footsteps approached across the hardwood floor. They were slow, deliberate steps. Elena scrambled to compose herself, intending to climb down and retreat to the utility room, but her haste was her enemy. Her foot slipped on the second rung. She gasped, her center of gravity shifting backward. For a terrifying second, she was weightless, flailing in the air, bracing for the impact of the hard floor. A strong hand clamped around her upper arm. Another hand grabbed the side of the ladder, steadying it with effortless strength. Elena found herself dangling for a moment before her feet found the rung again. She looked down. Her breath caught in her throat. Dante Moretti stood directly below her. He was taller than he looked in photos, with broad shoulders clad in a dark, tailored suit that probably cost more than she earned in a year. His tie was loosened, his top button undone, revealing the corded muscle of his neck. But it was his eyes that arrested her. They were dark, intelligent, and currently narrowed in assessment. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was a deep baritone, rough with fatigue but surprisingly calm. Elena gripped the ladder, her knuckles white. She looked down at him, and for a split second, her mask slipped. Pure, unadulterated terror flashed across her face, not the embarrassment of a clumsy employee, but the primal fear of a hunted animal cornered by a predator. She blinked, and the look vanished, replaced instantly by a polite, subservient smile. She lowered her gaze to his chest, avoiding direct eye contact. "I am fine, sir," she said, her voice steady but low. "I apologize. I did not expect you home so early." Dante did not let go of the ladder immediately. He held her gaze, or tried to, searching her face. He had seen that flash of fear. He was a man who traded in intimidation and power. He knew the difference between being startled and being terrified. The woman on the ladder was terrified. "Be careful," he said, finally stepping back to give her space. "The floors are slippery." Elena climbed down quickly, clutching her cleaning cloth. "Thank you, sir. I will move to the guest quarters so I do not disturb you." She practically fled the room, head bowed, shrinking into herself as she passed him. Dante watched her go. He walked to the wet bar and poured himself a glass of sparkling water, his eyes tracking her retreat. He took a sip, the bubbles sharp against his tongue. The agency usually sent chatty, middle-aged women who tried to catch his eye or fished for tips by leaving extra chocolates on his pillow. This one was different. Elena. He remembered her name from the security log. She moved like a ghost. She never looked at the expensive watches he left on the dresser. She never lingered in the rooms with the safe. And just now, when his phone had buzzed in his pocket, a distinct, vibrating hum, he had seen her flinch. It was a microscopic movement, a tightening of her shoulders, but he had caught it. He pulled his phone out and dialed a number. "Luca," he said when the line connected. "Boss, run a check on the cleaning girl. Elena Cruz," not the standard background check. "Dig a little deeper." "Is there a problem?" Luca asked, his voice sharpening. "No," Dante said, watching the empty hallway where she had disappeared. "Just curiosity. She's too jumpy for someone who just dusts furniture." In the sanctuary of the laundry room, Elena pressed her back against the cool washing machine and squeezed her eyes shut. Her heart was still racing. She'd been too close to him. He had seen her face. She needed to be more careful. Invisibility was her only safety. If Dante Moretti noticed her, he might ask questions. If he asked questions, he might find answers she had spent 2 years burying. She took a deep breath, forcing her pulse to slow. "You are just the help," she told herself. "He will forget you in an hour." She finished her shift in a blur of anxiety, sticking to the guest bedrooms and bathrooms, far away from the master suite and the living area. When the clock struck 6, she changed out of her uniform and into her street clothes, a baggy gray sweater and jeans that hid her figure. As she was packing her bag, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Elena froze. Very few people had this number. The agency. Her landlord. The utility company. She pulled the cheap smartphone out. The screen lit up with a text message from a number she did not recognize. The area code was from 3 states away. "You think we cannot find you? Leah?" The blood drained from Elena's face. The room seemed to tilt. The nickname, Leah. Nobody had called her that in 2 years. Not since the night she had run through the rain with a backpack full of cash and a stolen ledger. Her hands shook violently as she stared at the screen. The letters seemed to swim before her eyes. They knew. They were looking. And they were getting closer. She deleted the message instantly, her thumb hitting the trash icon with desperate force. She then went to the call history and blocked the number. It was a futile gesture. She knew. If they had her number, they could get another. She shoved the phone deep into her bag. "Breathe," she commanded herself. "Do not fall apart here. Not in his house." She walked to the service elevator. Keeping her head down, she signed out with the doorman, forcing a bland smile that felt like it might crack the skin of her face. "Have a good night, Elena," the doorman said pleasantly. "You as well," she whispered, stepping out into the cooling evening air. High above the city, Dante Moretti sat in his office, a single lamp illuminating the papers on his desk. He was not working. On the large monitor mounted on the wall, a paused video feed was displayed. It was footage from the living room security camera, recorded 10 minutes ago. Dante leaned back in his leather chair. studying the image. It showed Elena standing at the full-length window. She was not cleaning. She was standing perfectly still, her shoulders hunched up toward her ears, her hands clenched into fists against the glass. Even in the grainy resolution of the security camera, her posture screamed distress. She looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into the abyss. There was longing in the way she leaned toward the city lights, but there was a profound, paralyzing dread in the way she held herself back. Dante tapped his pen against the desk. What was a cleaning lady from the suburbs afraid of? Why did she look at the skyline as if it were a prison? He had met many people who were running from something. Debtors running from loan sharks, husbands running from wives, thieves running from the law. He knew the look. Elena Cruz was running for her life. He saved the clip and closed the file. The mystery of her gnawed at him, a distraction he did not need but suddenly found himself wanting. 3 days later, the weather turned. A storm front moved in off the coast, battering Ravello City with sheets of gray rain and howling winds. The penthouse was wrapped in clouds, the world outside reduced to a wall of white mist. Elena was in the kitchen, wiping down the marble countertops. She was moving faster than usual, her nerves frayed. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every vibration of her phone made her jump. Dante walked into the kitchen. He was dressed casually today, in dark jeans and a black cashmere sweater that softened the hard lines of his frame. He looked less like a mafia boss and more like a weary man seeking refuge from the storm. "Coffee?" he asked. Elena startled, nearly knocking over a vase of dried flowers. She spun around, clutching the spray bottle to her chest like a weapon. No. Thank you, sir," she stammered. "I am working." Dante ignored her refusal. He turned to the massive espresso machine and began pressing buttons. The machine whirred and hissed, filling the air with the rich, dark aroma of ground beans. "It is miserable outside," he said, his back to her. "Take a break. 5 minutes. The agency is not watching, and I am the one paying the bill." Elena hesitated. To refuse him twice felt dangerous. To accept felt intimate. She chose the lesser of two evils. She placed the spray bottle on the counter and took a hesitant step toward the kitchen island. She sat on the very edge of a high bar stool, her back ramrod straight, her feet hooked around the legs of the chair as if ready to launch herself away at a moment's notice. Dante turned and slid a steaming ceramic mug across the marble toward her. He placed a small silver pitcher of cream and a bowl of sugar cubes beside it. "Thank you," she murmured, wrapping her hands tightly around the mug. The heat seeped into her cold palms, grounding her. Dante did not leave. He leaned his hip against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest. He was close enough that she could smell the soap he used, something clean and masculine. He sipped his own coffee, watching her over the rim of his cup. "You are very quiet, Elena," he observed. "Most of the staff tell me their life stories within the first week. I know about the chef's divorce and the driver's gambling debt, but I know nothing about you." Elena kept her eyes fixed on the dark liquid in her cup. "There is not much to tell. Sir, I work. I go home. It is a simple life. Simple is rare these days," Dante said. He was studying her profile, the delicate curve of her jaw, the dark lashes casting shadows on her cheeks. She was beautiful, he realized, not in a flashy, obvious way, but in a quiet, haunting way, like a piece of art hidden in a dusty corner. Elena reached for a sugar cube. Her hand trembled slightly. As she reached, Dante reached for the cream pitcher at the same moment. Their fingers brushed. The contact was light, barely a graze, but Elena reacted as if she had touched a hot stove. She jerked her hand back, gasping, her chair scraping loudly against the floor as she recoiled. Her cheeks flushed a violent shade of red. "I am sorry," she breathed, pulling her hand against her chest, eyes wide with panic. Dante froze. He saw the genuine fear in her eyes again, the way she braced herself as if expecting a blow. His expression, usually unreadable, softened by a fraction. He slowly lowered his hand to the counter, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Elena," he said. his voice dropping an octave, becoming a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the air between them. "I am not going to hurt you." The words hung in the silence of the kitchen. "I am not going to hurt you." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time that day. She searched his face for the lie, for the cruelty she had come to expect from men in power. She found only a steady, calm intensity. The moment stretched, charged with an electricity she did not understand. It was terrifying, but beneath the fear, there was something else. A flicker of warmth, a recognition. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. I should get back to work. Thank you for the coffee, sir." She slid off the stool, abandoning the full mug, and hurried out of the kitchen without looking back. Dante remained leaning against the counter, staring at the space she had just vacated. He rubbed his thumb against the fingers that had brushed hers, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. The rain had stopped by the time Elena left the building, leaving the streets slick and reflecting the neon lights of the city. The air was cold and damp. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, burying her chin in her scarf. She walked quickly toward the bus stop, her boots clicking on the wet pavement. The encounter in the kitchen replayed in her mind on a loop. The warmth of his hand, the way he had said her name. It was dangerous to let him get close. She knew that. But for a second, she had wanted to believe him. A prickle of awareness ran down her spine. The sensation was sudden and sharp, the instinct of prey sensing a predator. Elena stopped and scanned the street, across the road, near the entrance to a closed newsstand. A figure was standing under the yellow glow of a lamppost. The person was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up to obscure their face. They were leaning casually against the post, the cherry of a cigarette glowing bright orange in the gloom. They were facing her. Elena's breath hitched. She could not see the eyes, but she could feel the weight of the stare. It was heavy, malicious, and familiar. She lowered her head, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Do not run," she told herself. "Running attracts attention." She forced herself to walk, quickening her pace just enough to look like someone in a hurry to get out of the cold. She reached the bus stop, where a small crowd had gathered. She pushed herself into the middle of the group, using the bodies of strangers as a barrier. She dared to glance back across the street. The lamppost stood empty. The figure was gone. The smoke from the cigarette still lingered in the air, faint and acrid, swirling in the damp breeze. Elena boarded the bus the moment it arrived, moving to the very back. She huddled in the corner seat, watching the city blur past the window. She was shaking again. They had found her city. Now they were watching her. The glass walls of Dante's penthouse suddenly felt very far away, and the protection she had tried to build for herself felt as fragile as paper. She was not invisible anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, the rhythm of Elena's life shifted in a way that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The cleaning agency called her almost every morning. "Mr. Moretti requested you specifically," the dispatcher would say, her voice tinged with a mixture of envy and confusion. "He says you are thorough. He likes that you do not talk." So Elena went. She went 3 times a week, then 4. She became a fixture in the glass tower, a ghost in a gray uniform drifting through the high-ceilinged rooms. The other staff members began to notice. The personal chef, a boisterous man named Marco, who usually ignored the cleaning crew, started watching her with narrowed eyes as he chopped vegetables. The doorman, who used to barely glance at her ID badge, now tipped his cap with a deference that felt unearned and dangerous. They whispered when they thought she could not hear. They wondered why the boss, a man known for his icy detachment and ruthless standards, would tolerate no one else in his personal sanctuary. Elena kept her headphones in, but she left the volume off. She heard the words, favorite and mystery and trouble. She tried to make herself smaller, scrubbing the marble floors until her knees ached, hoping that if she worked hard enough, she could scrub away the attention she was attracting, but invisibility was becoming impossible. In the back seat of his armored sedan, Dante Moretti stared out at the rain-slicked streets of Ravello City. The city was moving fast, a blur of lights and traffic, but inside the car, the air was still and heavy. Luca, his head of security, sat in the front passenger seat, twisting to face him. Luca was a man built like a vending machine, all square angles and brute force, but he had a mind like a steel trap. He held a manila folder in his large hands. "We ran the check you asked for, boss," Luca said. "The girl, Elena Cruz." Dante extended a hand and Luca passed the folder back. Dante opened it. It was thin, disappointingly thin. "She is clean," Luca continued. "No arrest record, no outstanding debts. Pays her taxes. Rent is always on time. But here's the thing that bothers me. She did not exist in this state 2 years ago." Dante scanned the documents. A lease agreement, a social security number that looked legitimate, but had very little credit history attached to it. "Name change?" Dante asked, his eyes fixing on a date 2 years prior. "Legal." Luca nodded, but buried deep. "She filed the paperwork in a county clerk office 3 towns over. Before that, she was just a ghost. But I dug into the employment history she tried to scrub. Before she started cleaning houses, she was working across state lines, bartending and waiting tables." "Where?" Dante asked. "A place called the Velvet Lounge," Luca said. Dante's hand froze on the paper. The name was familiar. It was not just a bar, it was a front, a distribution hub for narcotics and high-stakes illegal gambling. And it was the crown jewel in the territory of Victor Rinaldi. Victor Rinaldi. The name tasted like ash in Dante's mouth. Rinaldi was a savage, a man who lacked the code of honor that the Moretti family had maintained for generations. Rinaldi dealt in flesh and chaos. If Elena had worked for him, she had seen things. She was a waitress? Dante asked. And a dancer, occasionally. Luca replied, but she vanished the same week Rinaldi's downtown warehouse got raided by the feds. A lot of money went missing that week. Rinaldi lost 2 lieutenants and a shipment worth $3 million. Dante closed the folder. The picture was becoming clearer, though the edges were still blurred. A woman runs from a man like Victor Rinaldi. She changes her name. She takes a job where she thinks no one will look at her, and she jumps at the sound of a phone ringing. "Keep digging," Dante said, tossing the folder onto the seat beside him, "but keep it quiet. If Rinaldi is looking for her, I do not want him to know we are looking too." Elena was late. The bus had been delayed by an accident on the bridge, and she rushed into the lobby of the Penthouse building with her breath hitching in her chest. She hated being late. Tardiness drew attention. She was waiting for the service elevator, checking her phone to see if the agency had messaged her, when the device buzzed against her palm. It was not the agency. It was the unknown number again. Her stomach dropped to her shoes. She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the notification. She knew she should not open it. She knew she should throw the phone into the nearest trash can and run. But horror was a magnet. She opened the message. It was a photo. The quality was poor, grainy and zoomed in, but the subject was unmistakable. It was a picture of her, taken from a distance, walking through the revolving doors of this very building. She was wearing her gray winter coat, her head down, her bag slung over her shoulder. The caption beneath the photo was short. "Nice new life," Elena gasped, a sound that was swallowed by the chime of the elevator arrival. She looked around the lobby wildly. The potted palms, the marble pillars, the concierge desk, any of them could be hiding a lens. They were here. They had followed her. She deleted the message instantly, her fingers trembling so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She shoved it into her pocket as the elevator doors opened. She stepped inside, pressing her back against the metal wall, trying to regulate her breathing. In, out, in, out. She could not leave. If she ran now, she would look guilty. She needed the money. She needed to disappear again, but disappearing cost cash she did not have yet. She had to finish the shift. The penthouse was quiet, but the silence felt oppressive today. Elena moved through the rooms with a frantic energy, constantly glancing at the reflective surfaces of the windows. Every time she saw her own movement in the glass, she flinched, expecting to see a man in a leather jacket standing behind her. She was in the kitchen, washing the crystal stemware from the small bar cart. The water was hot, the soap slippery on her rubber gloves. Her mind was not on the glass in her hand. It was on the photo. Nice new life. It sounded like a threat. It sounded like a promise. The front door beeped and unlocked. Elena jumped, her elbow knocking against the granite counter. The delicate champagne flute in her hand slipped. It shattered against the edge of the sink, sending shards of crystal flying. "No, no, no," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. She stripped off her gloves and reached for the larger pieces, her hands shaking. She was not thinking. She just wanted to hide the evidence of her clumsiness, to erase the mistake before anyone saw. A sharp, biting pain sliced through her palm. Elena hissed, pulling her hand back. A jagged splinter of crystal had sliced deep into the fleshy part of her hand, just below her thumb. Blood welled up instantly, dark and fast, dripping onto the pristine white marble. "Elena," the voice came from the doorway. "Dante." He crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides. He looked tired, his suit jacket slung over one arm, his tie undone, but his eyes were wide with alarm as he saw the blood. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," Elena stammered, grabbing a dish rag and pressing it against her hand. "I will clean it up. I will pay for the glass. Please, I just—" "Stop," Dante commanded. He dropped his jacket on a bar stool and reached for her. He did not grab her roughly. He took her wrist with a firmness that brokered no argument but possessed no aggression. "Let me see." He said. "I am fine," she insisted, trying to pull away. "It is just a scratch. It is bleeding all over my floor," Dante said, his voice dropping to that calm, low register that always unsettled her. "Let me see, Elena." He peeled the rag away gently. The cut was angry and deep, still welling with blood. Dante hissed through his teeth. "This needs to be cleaned properly," he said. "Come here." He guided her to the main sink, maneuvering her so she stood in front of him. He reached past her to turn on the tap, testing the temperature with his own hand until it was lukewarm. Elena stood frozen. He was standing directly behind her. She could feel the heat radiating from his chest against her back. He was so large, so solid, and she was trapped between his body and the counter. In any other situation, with any other man, this would be the moment she would fight or scream. But he was not crowding her. He was creating a shelter. "Put your hand under the water," he instructed softly. Elena obeyed, her arm rigid. The water ran over her skin, washing away the blood. The sting was sharp, but the sensation of Dante's hand holding her wrist was sharper. His fingers were rough, calloused in a way that did not match his expensive suit. They were the hands of a man who had worked, who had fought. He used his other hand to gently manipulate her fingers, opening her palm to the stream. His breath ghosted against the shell of her ear. She shivered. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "A little," she whispered. Her body, which had been coiled tight with fear for hours, began to betray her. The tension leaked out, replaced by a heavy, languid warmth. She watched the water swirl pink in the drain. She felt the steady thump of his heart, or maybe it was hers, echoing in the small space between them. She risked a glance up, reflected in the dark window above the sink. She saw them. Dante's head was bent close to hers. His dark eyes focused intently on her hand. He looked protective, possessive even. In the reflection, his gaze lifted. Their eyes met in the glass. Time seemed to suspend. The sound of the running water faded into the background. Elena saw a flicker in his eyes, a raw, hungry heat that terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. It was the look of a man who saw something he wanted, something he recognized, for a heartbeat. She leaned back, just an inch, drawn by the magnetic pull of his presence. Then the memory of the text message crashed back into her mind. Nice new life. She swallowed hard, the spell breaking. She was not safe here. She was not safe anywhere. "I think it has stopped," she said, her voice trembling. Dante blinked, the intensity in his eyes retreating behind a mask of calm. He turned off the tap. "Wait," he said. He reached into a cabinet above the sink and pulled out a first aid kit. He dried her hand with a clean towel. his movements agonizingly slow. He applied antiseptic, ignoring her sharp intake of breath, and then wrapped a bandage around her palm. He smoothed the adhesive down with his thumb, his touch lingering on her skin for a second longer than necessary. "There," he said. "Keep it dry. Thank you." "Sir," Elena said, pulling her hand away. She stepped back, putting distance between them, needing to breathe air that did not smell like sandalwood and power. I should finish the floors." Dante leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. He did not let her go. Not yet. "You are from the South, aren't you?" he asked. The question was casual, conversational, but Elena felt it like a tripwire. "Why do you ask?" she said, keeping her eyes on her shoes. "Your accent," he said. "It comes out when you are scared." "I am not scared," she lied. "You are always scared." "Elena," he countered softly. "Do you have family here? In the city?" "No," she said, clipped. "No boyfriend? No husband?" "No." Dante tilted his head, studying her. "It is a big city to be alone in, especially with the way things are heating up downtown. You know, I have a business associate who owns a few clubs in the district, Victor Rinaldi. You ever hear of him?" The name hit her like a physical blow. Elena went pale. All the blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. Her hand, the one he had just bandaged, spasmed. The dishcloth she had been holding slipped from her fingers and landed on the floor with a wet slap. Victor, Rinaldi, he knew. He had to know. Why else would he say that name? Was he working with him? Was this a trap? I have to go," she muttered, backing away. "Elena?" Dante straightened up, frowning. "I am not feeling well," she gasped. "I have to leave. I am sorry." She turned and ran. She did not walk, she ran. She grabbed her bag from the utility closet and fled the apartment, ignoring Dante calling her name as the elevator doors slid shut. Dante stood in the silence of his kitchen, looking at the wet dishcloth on the floor. He had not meant to scare her that badly. He had meant to gauge a reaction, to see if the name meant anything to her. He had gotten his answer. The terror on her face when he said Rinaldi was not the reaction of a stranger. It was the reaction of a victim. Dante pulled out his phone and dialed Luca. "Where are you?" Dante asked. "Downstairs in the garage," Luca answered. "Get back up here, and bring the file on Rinaldi's recent communications. You think there is something there?" "I know there is," Dante said, his voice cold. "I want to know who Victor is hunting. I want to know who ran with his money or his secrets. Look for chatter about a woman, a thief, a traitor, whatever he is calling her. You think it is the cleaning girl?" Luca asked. Skeptical? Dante looked at the bandage wrapper on the counter. "I think Elena Cruz is walking around with a target on her back. And if Victor Rinaldi wants her that badly, there is a reason. Find out what it is." Elena did not remember the subway ride to her stop. Her mind was a chaotic whirlwind of panic. "He knows Rinaldi. He said his name. I have to leave. I have to pack tonight." She got off at her usual station. It was late, past 10 o'clock. The station was empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She climbed the stairs to the street level, the cool night air hitting her flushed face. Her apartment was only 3 blocks away. She just had to make it there, grab her emergency cash, and get on a bus to anywhere else. She heard it as soon as she turned the corner. Footsteps, heavy, rhythmic footsteps echoing on the concrete behind her. Elena stopped. The footsteps stopped. She started walking again, faster this time. The footsteps resumed, matching her pace, but slightly faster, closing the gap. She did not look back. She knew the rule. Never look back. It makes you look like prey. She turned sharply onto a side street, hoping to lose them, but the echoes followed. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard it hurt. She saw the neon sign of a corner store up ahead, Sal's Bodega. It was open. She broke into a run, bursting through the door of the bodega. The bell chimed aggressively. The cashier, an old man reading a newspaper, looked up in surprise. Elena rushed to the back aisle, grabbing a box of cereal at random. Her hands were shaking so violently the box rattled. She pressed herself against the shelf, trying to make herself invisible. She looked toward the front of the store. There was a convex mirror mounted in the corner of the ceiling, showing the entrance and the sidewalk outside. Through the distorted reflection of the mirror, she saw him. A man walked past the large glass window of the store. He was not looking at the display. He was scanning the interior of the shop. He wore a heavy leather jacket and dark jeans. His face was hard, his eyes predatory. He paused for a second, his gaze lingering on the cashier, then on the aisles. Elena held her breath, tears stinging her eyes. She recognized the jacket. She recognized the way he walked. He was one of Victor's enforcers, a man named Silas who enjoyed his work too much. He did not come in. He lingered for a moment longer, then continued walking down the street, disappearing into the shadows. Elena let out a ragged sob, clutching the cereal box to her chest. It was confirmed. It was not just paranoia. It was not just a text message. They were here, in her city, on her street. The nightmare she had been running from for 2 years had finally caught up to her, and this time, there was nowhere left to run. The phone call to the agency was a desperate, calculated risk. Elena stood in the narrow alleyway behind her apartment building, the brick wall rough against her shoulder, shielding the receiver from the wind. She needed to get out. Ravello City had become a cage, and the Penthouse, once her sanctuary, now felt like the center of a target. "I need to be reassigned," Elena said, her voice tight. "Please, put me on the commercial rotation, offices, warehouses. Anything but the Moretti residence." There was a pause on the line, followed by the sound of typing. The dispatcher, a woman named Sharon who usually sounded bored, now sounded irritated. "We cannot do that, Elena," Sharon said. "Mr. Moretti called the office personally this morning. He specifically requested that you continue as his primary housekeeper." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "Why?" He said, "You are thorough," Sharon replied, "and that you do not talk. Do you have any idea how valuable that contract is to us? We are not going to jeopardize it because you are feeling fickle. If you refuse the assignment, we will have to terminate your employment entirely." Elena ended the call. The silence of the alley pressed in on her. She was trapped. She needed the money to run. A bus ticket would not be enough. She needed a new identity, a deposit on a room in a new state, enough to survive for a month while she found work. But to get the money, she had to return to the glass tower where Dante Moretti was watching her with eyes that saw too much. Returning to the penthouse felt like walking into a lion's den. Elena moved through the apartment with a brittle, frantic energy. Her movements were sharper than usual. She scrubbed surfaces that were already clean. She checked the locks on the windows 3 times in an hour. Every time the elevator chimed, signaling a delivery or a staff change, she flinched, her shoulders hiking up toward her ears. Dante was home. He had been working from the study all morning. The heavy oak door left slightly ajar. He was not looking at his paperwork. He was watching the sliver of the hallway where Elena passed back and forth. He saw the way she tracked the room like a cornered animal. He saw the tremor in her hands when she set down a stack of sorted mail. "Enough," Dante muttered to himself. He waited until she passed the study again, carrying a basket of linens. He stepped out, moving with a deceptive speed for a man of his size, and positioned himself in the center of the corridor. Elena rounded the corner and nearly collided with him. She gasped, dropping the basket. White towels spilled across the Persian runner. She scrambled backward, her back hitting the wall. "I'm sorry," she cried out, her eyes wide and terrified. "I did not see you." Dante did not look at the towels. He looked at her. He stepped closer, not aggressively, but with a firmness that consumed the space between them. He placed one hand on the wall beside her head, not touching her, but effectively cutting off her escape route. "Elena," Dante said. His voice was low, devoid of the anger she clearly expected. "Look at me." She refused. She stared at the knot of his tie, her chest heaving. "Look at me," he repeated, softer this time. Slowly, painfully. She lifted her gaze. Her eyes were shining with unshed tears, rimmed with the red exhaustion of sleepless nights. "You are vibrating with fear," Dante observed. "You jump at shadows. You cut your hand on a glass because you were distracted by terror. I am done guessing. Is someone threatening you?" Elena shook her head rapidly. No, sir, I have been under the weather." "You are a terrible liar," Dante said. "People do not look like you unless they are being hunted. Tell me who it is. I can handle it. I just need to work," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, if I lose this job, I have nothing. Just let me do my work." She looked away, a tear finally escaping and tracking through the dust on her cheek. The desperation in her voice was raw, a jagged thing that cut through Dante's composure. He wanted to shake the truth out of her, but he knew it would only shatter her. He pulled his hand back from the wall. "Fine," he said, stepping aside. "Finish the linen, but stay inside until the car is ready. It is raining." "I take the bus," she said automatically, kneeling to gather the towels with shaking hands. Not tonight, Dante thought, watching the curve of her spine, but he let her believe she had won the argument. The shift ended at 6. The sky was already dark, a bruised purple hanging over the city. Elena signed out at the concierge desk, keeping her head down. She pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The air was cold, biting at her exposed skin. She turned right, heading toward the bus stop, her pace brisk. She had her headphones in, but no music playing, her ears straining for the sound of footsteps. She did not hear footsteps. She heard a car door open. 2 men stepped out of a black sedan parked illegally in the loading zone. They were not local street thugs. They wore expensive leather jackets and moved with the heavy, assured gait of professional enforcers. Elena froze. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Leah!" One of the men called out. The name hit her like a physical blow. It was the name of a dead woman, the name she had buried 2 years ago. Panic flashed across her face, stark and undeniable under the streetlights. She took a stumbling step back, ready to run back toward the building, but the second man had moved to flank her. "Victor sends his regards," the first man said, smiling a smile that did not reach his eyes. "He has missed you." They reached for her. Before their hands could touch the fabric of her coat, a wall of motion erupted from the building's entrance. 2 of Dante's security team, men Elena had seen standing silently in the lobby for weeks, surged forward. They did not shout. They did not run wildly. They moved with a terrifying, disciplined efficiency. They stepped between Elena and the men from the sedan, creating a human barrier. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" the lead security officer asked. His voice was conversational, but his hand was resting inside his jacket, clearly gripping the handle of a concealed weapon. The man who had spoken to Elena sneered, sizing up the opposition. He looked at the security guards, then up at the cameras scanning the building entrance. He knew the rules of the city. This was Moretti territory. A snatch and grab on the doorstep was an act of war. "Just catching up with an old friend," the man said, his eyes drilling into Elena. "We will catch her another time." They stepped back, moving in sync, and retreated to the sedan. The car peeled away into the traffic, disappearing into the river of red taillights. Elena stood on the sidewalk, trembling so violently her teeth chattered. She could not move. Her feet felt welded to the concrete. "Miss Cruz," the security guard said gently. "Mr. Moretti is waiting for you." Elena turned. Dante was standing just inside the glass doors of the lobby. He had seen everything. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes, when they locked onto hers, were burning. He pushed the doors open and strode out, ignoring the cold. He did not say a word. He simply placed a heavy hand on her shoulder and guided her back inside. The ride up in the private elevator was suffocating. The walls were mirrored, reflecting Elena's pale, stricken face from every angle. She pressed herself back against the glass, trying to disappear, trying to find a way out of the box. Dante stood in front of her. He did not look at himself in the mirrors. He stood with his feet planted wide, his broad back facing the doors, shielding her from the world outside. He was a fortress. He could hear her rapid, shallow breathing. It sounded like the flutter of a trapped bird. "Breathe." "Elena," he said, not turning around. "You are safe." "I am not safe," she choked out. "They found me. They know where I work. We will discuss it upstairs," he said. When the doors opened into the penthouse, Dante ushered her into the living room. He locked the elevator override key, ensuring no one could come up without his direct permission. "You're not leaving," Dante stated. He walked to the bar and poured a glass of water, his movements precise and controlled. "You are staying here until we understand exactly what is going on." Elena exploded. The fear that had been compressing inside her for days finally detonated. She did not take the water. She threw her bag onto the sofa and spun on him, her voice breaking into a shout. "I cannot stay here. Do you not understand? They saw me here. You dragged me into this." Dante set the glass down hard. "I dragged you." "Yes," she cried, tears spilling over. "I was invisible. I was a nobody. Then you had to make me your project. You had to ask for me by name. You put a spotlight on me. And now they have found me. This is your world. Dante, the violence, the men in cars. This is your life, not mine." Dante crossed the room. He did not shout, but his voice was like granite. "Do not lie to yourself, Elena. That danger was not waiting for me. It was waiting for you. They called you Leah. They knew you. That was not my world crashing down on you. It was your past catching up." He stopped a few feet from her. "And you are wrong about one thing," he continued. "You are safer under this roof than you would be anywhere else on this earth. Out there, you are prey. In here, you are under my protection." Elena stared at him, her chest heaving, her anger crumbling into misery. She wrapped her arms around herself, sinking onto the edge of the sofa. "You do not know who they are," she whispered. "You cannot stop them." "Try me," Dante said. 2 hours later. The penthouse was dark, lit only by the city glow filtering through the glass walls. The anger had burned out, leaving only a hollow exhaustion. Dante found her on the balcony. She was sitting on the floor, curled up against the glass railing. She had wrapped herself in one of the spare wool blankets from the living room, her knees hugged tightly to her chest. She was staring out at the skyline, at the millions of lights that offered no hiding place. The wind was whipping her hair across her face, but she did not seem to feel the cold. Dante watched her for a moment. She looked incredibly small against the backdrop of the sprawling, indifferent city. He opened the sliding door and stepped out. The wind hit him, carrying the scent of rain and exhaust. He took off his suit jacket. He walked over to her and draped it around her shoulders, covering the blanket. Elena flinched slightly but did not pull away. Dante sat down beside her. He did not crowd her. He kept a respectful distance, a foot of cold tile between them, but close enough that if he leaned, their knees would touch. He rested his forearms on his knees and looked out at the view. "Talk to me." "Elena," he said quietly. "No more running." She was silent for a long time. The wind ruffled the silk of his shirt. "My name is not Elena," she said. Her voice was thin, carried away by the breeze. "It was Amelia. Everyone called me Leah." Dante waited, letting the silence invite her in. "I worked at a club called the Velvet Lounge." She continued. "It is owned by Victor Rinaldi." Dante's jaw tightened at the name, but he did not interrupt. "I was young. I needed money. The tips were good." She rested her chin on her knees. "Victor's. He likes to own things. He likes to own people. He groomed the girls who worked for him, made them feel special, then made them dependent, then made them afraid. I thought I was smart enough to stay on the fringes. I just served drinks. I just danced." She took a shuddering breath. "One night, I went into the back office to get a case of vodka. Victor was there. He had one of the other dancers, a girl named Sarah. She was 19. She had tried to quit." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper, trembling with the memory. He was beating her. He did not stop. He broke her face. Dante. He beat her until she stopped making sounds, and he laughed while he did it. Dante closed his eyes briefly, a surge of revulsion and dark anger twisting in his gut. "I ran," Elena said, "but I did not just run. I knew where he kept the ledger, the real one, the one with the payoffs and the shipments. I took pictures. And when the police raided the warehouse a week later, it was because I had sent those pictures to an undercover cop I had served a few times." She turned her head to look at Dante. Her face was wet with tears. Her eyes dark pools of trauma. "I cost him millions. I sent 3 of his men to prison. He does not just want to kill me. Dante, he wants to make an example of me. He wants to finish what he started with Sarah." As she spoke, the tears tracked through the dust on her cheeks. She looked shattered, holding herself together by sheer will. Dante turned toward her completely. His gaze was searching, stripping away the layers of defense she had built. He saw the bravery it had taken to do what she did, and the terror she had lived with ever since. He reached up slowly. His thumb brushed against her cheekbone, wiping away a tear. His skin was warm against the cold of her face. Elena froze, her breath hitching. She watched his eyes. She expected to see judgment or pity. Instead, she saw a profound, fierce recognition. When she did not pull away, Dante let his hand linger. He cupped her jaw, his fingers sliding into the hair at the nape of her neck. "You are not alone in this anymore," he murmured. He leaned in. The movement was slow, giving her 1,000 chances to push him away. She did not. Her eyes fluttered closed. His lips brushed hers. It was a soft kiss, tentative, testing the waters. It was not a demand for possession, it was an offer of shelter. His hand splayed lightly against the back of her neck, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin behind her ear. Elena let out a shaky breath, and the sound seemed to break the dam. She leaned into him. Her fingers uncurled from the blanket and clutched the fabric of his shirt, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart beneath the silk. The kiss deepened for a brief, suspended moment. It tasted of salt tears and the clean rain. It was a promise made without words, a sealing of a pact she had not agreed to but desperately needed. Then, the reality of her situation crashed back in. She broke away, gasping for air. She pulled back, her hand flying to her mouth. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I cannot. I do not want to be indebted to another man. I do not want to be owned." Dante stayed where he was. He did not chase her. He watched her with an intensity that burned. "You owe me nothing," he said, his voice rough. "This is not a transaction, Elena." He stood up, offering a hand she did not take. "But know this," he said, looking down at her. "I will not let Victor Rinaldi take you. I will burn this city to the ground before I let him touch you again." Inside the penthouse, the atmosphere had shifted from fear to war. Dante paced the length of his study, the phone pressed to his ear. Elena had retreated to the guest room, the door locked, but Dante knew she was listening. "Luca," Dante said into the phone, "I am here. Boss, we're going to lock down. Full perimeter security. I want 2 men in the lobby, 2 on the service entrance, and 1 on the fire escape roof." "Understood," Luca said. "Is the girl okay? She is rattled," Dante said, "but she is here. Now listen to me closely. Rinaldi knows she is in the city, but he does not know she is in this apartment. He saw her outside, but he thinks she was just leaving work. We need to muddy the water. What is the play?" "Leak information," Dante commanded. "Find a few of the low-level snitches who sell to Rinaldi's crew. Feed them a story. Tell them Elena Cruz was seen boarding a bus to Chicago 2 days ago. Tell them she quit the agency. Tell them she is gone. You want to send them on a wild goose chase?" "I want to buy time," Dante said, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. "I am going to take Victor's threat apart, piece by piece. I am going to find every weakness in his operation, and I am going to exploit it. But while I do that, Elena stays invisible." "Copy that," Luca said. "And boss, be careful. Rinaldi is desperate. If he finds out you are sheltering the woman who betrayed him—" "Let him come," Dante said. His voice dropped dead calm. "I have been waiting for a reason to end him." He hung up the phone. He looked toward the hallway leading to the guest room. He could imagine Elena sitting on the edge of the bed, terrified and alone. He would not go to her now. He would keep his word. He would not push. But as he touched his own lips, recalling the ghost of her touch, he knew that the line had been crossed. She was not just a guest. She was the only thing that mattered. The guest room on the eastern side of the penthouse had become Elena's entire world. For 3 nights, she had slept in the massive bed with its high thread-count sheets, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city 50 floors below. She told herself this was temporary, just a few nights until the heat died down. until Dante's men could confirm that Victor Rinaldi had lost her scent. She tried to make herself as small as possible within Dante's sprawling home. She wore the simplest clothes she had packed in her haste, gray sweatpants and oversized t-shirts that swallowed her frame. She moved quietly, sticking to the shadows of the hallway, avoiding the main living areas unless she was cleaning. She insisted on maintaining her duties. If she was going to stay here, she would earn her keep. She would not be a charity case, but the penthouse, once so vast and cold, now felt intimate. The air seemed charged with a static electricity that hummed whenever Dante was in the room. Dante was struggling too. He had spent years cultivating a life of solitude, treating his home as a fortress where no one was allowed to linger. Now, he found himself listening for her footsteps. He found himself leaving doors open that he usually kept closed. He was a man used to taking what he wanted, but with Elena, he was learning the agonizing art of restraint. He wanted to comfort her, but he knew that every step he took toward her looked like a threat to a woman who had been hunted. On the fourth morning, the sun broke through the clouds, flooding the living room with sharp, golden light. Elena was there early, a feather duster in hand, moving methodically around the sculptures on the mantelpiece. She had her headphones in, the cord dangling into her pocket, a barrier against the world. She did not hear the door to the master suite open. Dante walked into the living room. He had just come from the gym and a shower. For the first time since she had known him, he was not wearing the armor of his bespoke suits. He wore a pair of worn gray jogging bottoms and a plain black t-shirt that clung to his damp skin. His hair was wet, darker than usual, combed back casually with his fingers. He looked younger. He looked like a man, not a myth. He stopped when he saw her. The sunlight caught the dust motes dancing around her, turning them into a halo. Elena turned to move to the next table and froze. Her eyes widened as they took him in. She was used to the terrifying, impeccably dressed businessman. She was not prepared for this domestic version of him, the barefoot man with damp hair standing in his own living room holding a mug of coffee. She looked away quickly, her cheeks heating up. "Good morning, Mr. Moretti," she murmured, fixing her gaze on a bronze statue. Dante saw the blush bloom across her neck. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good morning, Elena," he said. His voice was rougher in the morning, deeper. "There is coffee in the pot if you want some. I am fine. Thank you," she said, her voice tight. It felt dangerously normal. It felt like a shared life, and that terrified her more than the silence. Later that afternoon, the tension that had been simmering between them finally bubbled over. Elena was in the library, tackling the high shelves that lined the west wall. She had brought the stepladder, but the library's ceilings were vaulted, and the highest shelf was just out of her comfortable reach. She was trying to dust the top of a heavy marble bust. She stretched her arm up, standing on her tiptoes on the top rung of the ladder. It was a foolish move, and she knew it, but she was stubborn. She reached just a little further. The ladder shifted on the polished wood floor. Elena gasped as her balance faltered. She grabbed the edge of the shelf to steady herself, but her momentum was swinging backwards suddenly. A warm, solid weight pressed against her back. Dante had walked in at the exact moment she slipped. He did not grab her. He stepped in close, using his body as a brace. He planted one hand firmly on the shelf above her head to steady the structure, and his other hand hovered just inches from her waist, ready to catch her if she fell, but careful not to touch her without permission. "Careful," he rumbled. His voice vibrated through her spine. Elena froze. She was trapped between the bookshelf and Dante. She could feel the heat radiating from his chest, searing through the thin cotton of her shirt. She could smell the soap he used, clean and sharp, mixed with the natural scent of his skin. She was safe, yet she felt like she was standing on the edge of a precipice. Slowly, she lowered her heels back to the ladder rung. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. She turned around, intending to apologize and retreat. She had underestimated how close he was. When she turned, her face was inches from his. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. His eyes were dark, dilated, searching hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. His hand was still on the shelf above her, creating a cage of his own body, but he was not touching her. He was waiting. The air between them was thick, heavy with unsaid words and suppressed desire. Elena could see the flecks of gold in his dark irises. She could feel his breath mingling with hers. For a terrifying, beautiful second, she wanted to lean forward. She wanted to close the gap. I am sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dante did not move. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back up to her eyes. You need to stop trying to do everything alone. Elena, you are allowed to ask for help. I do not need help, she breathed, though the lie was flimsy. He stayed there for one heartbeat longer, letting the moment hang suspended in time. Then, with a visible effort, he stepped back. He dropped his hand from the shelf and put distance between them. The cold air rushed in to fill the space where his warmth had been. Elena felt the loss immediately. "Excuse me," she mumbled, clutching her duster. She scrambled down the ladder and hurried out of the room, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, while the atmosphere inside the penthouse grew thick with romantic tension. The world outside was sharpening its knives. In the security office on the ground floor, Luca was pacing. He held a phone to his ear, listening to the report from one of his street-level scouts. "Are you sure?" Luca asked, his voice low. The voice on the other end was tinny but clear. 100%. Victor is tearing the city apart. He does not believe the story about Chicago. He has men parked down the street from the Diamond Tower, the Sterling Heights, and your building. They are looking for a face. Luca. They have a photo. Luca swore softly. Victor Rinaldi was many things. Cruel, vicious, greedy, but he was not stupid. He knew Elena had no money. He knew she would seek shelter in the places she knew. Luca hung up and took the private elevator to the penthouse. He found Dante in the home office, staring out the window, his expression grim. Dante turned as Luca entered. "Tell me." "He's not buying it," Luca said without preamble. "Victor is watching the building. He's convinced she is still in the city. If he finds out she is here, Dante, this goes from a cold war to a hot one in about 10 seconds. Dante's expression did not change. Let him watch. If one of his men sets foot on the property line, break his legs, it is risky. Boss, Luca warned. The commission will not like a war over a cleaning girl. She is not just a cleaning girl, Dante said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. And I do not care what the commission likes. Tighten the perimeter. No one gets in or out without my direct approval. Elena was walking past the open door of the home office when she heard Dante's voice. It was not the gentle voice he used with her. It was cold, hard, and terrifying. We hold the territory, Dante was saying into his phone. If Rinaldi tries to move a shipment through the docks tonight, seize it. Burn it if you have to. I want him to bleed. Elena stopped dead in the hallway. The blood drained from her face. Shipments, territory, burn it. She'd spent days trying to convince herself that Dante was different, that he was just a powerful man who operated in the gray areas. But those words belonged to the world she had run from. They belonged to men like Victor. She pushed the door open. Dante looked up, surprised, phone still in his hand. He saw the look on her face, the horror, the betrayal, and he ended the call immediately. "Elena, what are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dante set the phone down on the mahogany desk. He did not try to hide. He stood up, smoothing his jacket. "I am a businessman. Elena, do not lie to me," she shouted, stepping into the room. "Businessmen do not talk about burning shipments. Businessmen do not have armed guards at the door. You are just like him. You are just like Victor." Dante's eyes flashed with anger. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. "I am nothing like Victor," he said, his voice hard. "You run a criminal empire." She accused, backing away until she hit the edge of a bookshelf. "You hurt people. You control people. I heard you. You are talking about war. I'm talking about survival," Dante snapped. "Yes, I operate outside the law. I will not lie to you about that. My family has held power in this city for 50 years, but I have rules." "Rules?" Elena laughed, a harsh, hysterical sound. "What rules?" "I do not touch women," Dante said, stepping closer. "I do not touch children. I do not traffic in human beings. I do not force anyone to work for me. I keep the order. Victor is chaos. He destroys everything he touches. I protect what is mine." "You are a criminal," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes, and I ran from one monster just to hide in the lair of another. The words hit Dante like a slap. The hurt flashed in his eyes, raw and open before he clamped down on it. "Is that what you think I am?" he asked quietly. "A monster? You use fear," she said, "just like him." "I am using fear to keep you alive," Dante's control snapped. He shouted the words, the echo ringing in the room. He stepped in, invading her space, towering over her. "Do you think you are safe because of luck? You are safe because everyone in this city is terrified of what I will do to them if they touch you." Elena stared up at him, her chest heaving. The fear was there, yes, but beneath it was the undeniable magnetic pull that had been growing between them for weeks. The electricity in the room was suffocating. She reached out and pressed her hand against his chest, intending to push him away. "Get back," she said. But she did not push. Her hand rested over his heart. It was thudding against her palm, a frantic, powerful rhythm that betrayed his calm exterior. He was not a stone statue. He was a man, and he was unraveling. Dante looked down at her hand on his chest. He covered it with his own, pressing her palm tighter against him. "I want you safe, Elena," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not owned. There is a difference." He looked at her mouth. Elena saw the hunger in his eyes. It mirrored the ache in her own chest, the desperate need to feel something other than fear, the need to be close to the only source of heat in her cold world. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. Dante took that as the only permission he needed. He reached up, his large hands framing her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "Elena," he groaned. He lowered his head and captured her lips. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce. It was a collision of frustration and desire that had been building since the moment he saw her on that ladder. Dante kissed her like a man starving. His mouth moved over hers with a demanding urgency, tasting the salt of her tears and the sweetness of her breath. Elena made a small sound in her throat and rose on her toes, her body leaning into his. She kissed him back with equal desperation. For a moment, the fear vanished. There was only Dante. There was only his strength, his hands in her hair, the hard wall of his chest against hers. She felt alive. She felt wanted, not as a possession, but as a woman. His hands slid down her back, pulling her flush against him. The heat was overwhelming. The kiss deepened, becoming a drug she wanted to drown in. Then, a flicker of memory. Victor's hand on her neck, the feeling of being trapped. Elena pulled back. She gasped, breaking the kiss, her chest heaving. She stumbled back a step, her eyes wide and dark. Dante froze. He did not chase her. He stood exactly where he was, his hands hovering in the air where she had just been. "I cannot," she whispered, her voice shaking. Dante watched her, his breathing ragged. "Why?" "Because," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, "if I stay here, if I do this, I need to be more than just something you saved. I need to be more than a stray cat you took in. I cannot be your charity case, Dante, and I cannot be your prisoner." Dante looked at her. He saw the fierce pride in her eyes. He saw the woman who had brought down a crime syndicate and survived on the run for 2 years. He slowly lowered his hands to his sides. He took a step back, increasing the distance between them. "You are right," he said. His voice was hoarse, but steady. "You are not a prisoner, and you are certainly not a charity case." He nodded once, a gesture of respect. "I will wait," he said, "until you are ready, or until you walk away. But I will not take what is not freely given." He turned and walked to the window, putting the width of the room between them. He gripped the sill, his knuckles white, proving to her and to himself that he could stop, that he was not Victor. Elena watched his back. Her heart was racing, her lips still tingling from his touch. The fear was fading, replaced by a new, terrifying realization. She trusted him. 2 days later, the fragile peace was shattered. It was evening. The sun was setting over Ravello City, painting the sky in streaks of blood orange. Dante was in the living room, reading a report, while Elena sat on the opposite sofa, pretending to read a book. They were existing in a careful orbit, the memory of the kiss hanging between them like a ghost. Luca burst into the room. He did not knock. "Boss," Luca said, his face grim. "We have a problem." Dante stood up instantly. "What is it?" "One of the administrative assistants from the construction arm." Luca said, "Sarah Jenkins. She has dark hair. About Elena's height. She left the main office downtown an hour ago." "And?" Dante asked, his voice sharpening. "A black SUV followed her," Luca said. "It cut her off 3 blocks from her apartment. 2 men got out and they got a good look at her face, realized it was not Elena, and got back in the car. But they followed her because she looked like her." Dante looked at Elena. She had gone pale, the book forgotten in her lap. "They are hunting," Dante said. "They are getting bold," Luca corrected. "That happened in broad daylight. Victor knows she is close to the operation. He's testing the fences. He's trying to see how we react." Dante turned to the window, looking out at the darkening city. The lights were flickering on, one by one. Somewhere out there, in the shadows of the docks, Victor Rinaldi was waiting. "This ends now," Dante said. He turned back to Elena. He walked over to her and knelt down so he was at eye level. He took her hands in his. They were cold. "He knows you are in my territory," Dante said. "He is prepared to start a war to get you back." Elena looked at him. The fear was there, but it was different now. It was steel-edged. "What do we do?" she asked. "We do not hide anymore," Dante said. "If he wants a war, I am going to give him one, but I'm going to finish it on my terms." He squeezed her hands. "Do you trust me?" Elena looked at the man who had stopped when she asked, the man who had given her his home, the man who was willing to burn his empire for her safety. "Yes," she whispered. Dante stood up. "Good. Because things are about to get very ugly." The air in the penthouse was thick enough to choke on. The expansive glass windows, usually offering a view of freedom, now felt like the walls of a fishbowl. Outside, the city of Ravello was waking up to a gray, drizzling morning, but inside the Moretti residence, the storm had already broken. Dante stood behind his desk in the home office, his knuckles white as he leaned against the mahogany surface. Across from him sat 3 men. One was Luca, his head of security, who looked grim and exhausted. The other 2 were senior advisors to the family, men with silver hair and hearts made of calculus, who viewed human lives as columns on a spreadsheet. "We took a hit last night. Dante, the older advisor, Stefano, said," his voice was calm, which made the news worse. "One of the distribution trucks was torched in the warehouse district. The driver was pulled out and beaten. He's in the hospital with 2 broken legs and a shattered jaw. They pinned a note to his chest." Dante did not ask what the note said. He knew. It said, "Return what is mine," Luca supplied quietly. Stefano adjusted his cufflinks. "This is escalating. Dante, Rinaldi is not bluffing. He's bleeding our operations. The unions are getting nervous. The suppliers are holding back shipments. We are losing money by the hour, and we are looking weak." "I do not care about the money," Dante said, his voice a low rumble. "You should," the second advisor countered. "This empire relies on stability. You are risking it all for a house cleaner. It is irrational. It is a matter of honor," Dante snapped, straightening up. "We do not let rivals dictate terms to us." Stefano sighed, leaning forward. "Be practical. Rinaldi does not want the territory. He wants the girl. He wants to make an example of her. Hand her over, or better yet, use her. Tell Rinaldi you agree to a trade. Set up a meeting. Use her as the bait to draw him out, then ambush him." "No," Dante said. The word was absolute. "Think about the cost," Stefano pressed. "How many of your men have to bleed for her? She is a liability. She is leverage. Rinaldi wants her alive. If you give him what he wants, the war stops today." "I said no," Dante shouted, slamming his hand onto the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the room. "Elena is not a piece of leverage. She is under my protection. We find another way. We find Rinaldi's weakness and we exploit it, but she stays here." Elena stood in the hallway, pressed against the wall just outside the slightly ajar door. She'd been coming to bring fresh coffee, a task she clung to in an attempt to feel useful. But she had stopped when she heard the voices. Her hand trembled, the china cups rattling softly on the tray. She bit her lip to silence them. She had missed the beginning. She had missed Dante's refusal. What she heard, ringing in her ears with terrifying clarity, were Stefano's words. She is a liability. She is leverage. Rinaldi wants her alive. If you give him what he wants, the war stops today. She heard the silence that followed, a heavy, contemplative silence that her terrified mind filled with Dante's acquiescence. She thought of the beaten driver. She thought of the empire Dante was risking. She remembered the look on his face when he talked about his business, the cold, pragmatic look of a king protecting his kingdom. He had kissed her. He had held her. But in the end, he was a Moretti, and she was just the girl who cleaned his floors. History was repeating itself. Men like Victor, men like Dante, they moved people around like chess pieces. She had been foolish to think she was the queen when she was merely a pawn. Elena backed away slowly, her heart shattering in her chest. She turned and walked silently back to the kitchen, leaving the coffee tray on the counter. Her hands were numb. Her vision was blurred with tears she refused to shed. She would not wait for him to come to her with an apology and a pair of handcuffs. She would not wait to be traded like a shipment of stolen goods. Night fell over the city, wrapping the skyscrapers in fog. The penthouse was quiet. Dante was still locked in the office, coordinating a counterstrike with Luca. Elena moved like a ghost in the guest room. She did not pack the silk blouses or the cashmere sweaters Dante had ordered for her. She took only the worn backpack she had arrived with. She packed her old jeans, her heavy sweater, and the few dollars she had stashed in a sock. She looked at the bed where she had spent the last few nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if she could have a future here. She smoothed the duvet one last time, a reflex of her profession, leaving the room perfect and impersonal. She did not use the main elevator. She knew the codes for the service lift, the one the catering staff and maintenance crew used. It exited into the alleyway behind the building, bypassing the doorman and the main security desk. Elena slipped into the metal box and pressed the button for the ground floor. As the doors closed, sealing off the world of glass and marble, she let out a single, ragged zem, then she wiped her face, pulled her hood up, and hardened her heart. She was Leah again, and Leah knew how to run. The city was cold and hostile. Elena walked with her head down, sticking to the shadows. She headed first toward the old bus station on the south side, intending to buy a ticket to anywhere, but halfway there, she stopped. Victor would be watching the stations. He would be watching the airports. If she tried to run, he would catch her, and he would drag her back to him. And the war with Dante would continue. She stopped under the flickering light of a street lamp. She pulled out her burner phone. Her thumb hovered over the contacts. She had blocked the unknown number, but she had not deleted the history. She unblocked it. She typed a message. I am done hiding. I will give you what you want, but you leave Moretti and his people alone. This ends tonight. She hit send. The response came 30 seconds later. A set of coordinates and a time. Midnight, the Blue Note Motel. Room 12. Elena stared at the screen. It was a trap. She knew it was a trap, but it was the only card she had left to play. She turned around and began the long walk toward the seedy outskirts of the city. It was nearly 11 o'clock when Dante emerged from his office. He rubbed his temples, his eyes gritty with exhaustion. He had sent the advisors away. He had formulated a plan to hit 3 of Rinaldi's gambling dens simultaneously, a show of force that would drive Victor back to the negotiating table on Dante's terms. He needed to see her. He needed to remind himself why he was starting a war. "Elena," he called out softly, walking toward the guest wing. The door to her room was open. The lamp was off. Dante stepped inside. "Elena." Silence answered him. He flipped the light switch. The room was pristine. The bed was made. The closet door stood open. revealing the empty hangers where her old clothes had hung. The expensive clothes he had bought her were folded neatly on the dresser, untouched. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Dante's chest. "Elena," he shouted, turning and sprinting back into the hallway. He checked the kitchen, he checked the terrace, he checked the laundry room. Empty, empty, empty. "Luca," Dante roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Luca appeared from the security monitoring room, his gun half drawn at the tone of his boss's voice. "What is it? She is gone," Dante snarled, grabbing his jacket. "Check the cameras, now." They stood before the bank of monitors. Luca rewound the footage with flying fingers. "There," Dante said, pointing at the screen. 3 hours ago. The service elevator camera captured a graining image of a small figure in a hooded coat stepping inside. She looked back once, her face pale and set in a mask of determination, before the doors slid shut. She used the service exit. Luca swore. How did she know the code? "She cleans the building," Dante said, his voice hollow. "She watches. She learns." "Why would she leave?" Luca asked. "She was safe here." Dante stared at the screen, at the empty expression on her face. He replayed the day in his mind, the meeting, the open door. She heard us, Dante realized, the guilt hitting him like a physical blow. She heard Stefano talking about a trade. "She thinks I sold her out." He turned to Luca, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. "Track her phone. She probably turned it off." "Boss, she has a burner," Dante said. "She uses it to check in with the agency. Find the signal. If she is out there alone, Victor will find her." Luca typed furiously. "I have a ping. Weak signal. It is on the edge of town, a motel near the highway." Dante was already moving toward the private elevator. "Get the car. Get the men. We're going." The Blue Note Motel was a crumbling relic of the 1970s, the neon sign buzzing with a dying electrical hum. Room 12 was at the back, facing a dumpster that smelled of rotting fruit. Elena sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. She kept her coat on. She stared at the door. A knock came. 3 sharp raps. Elena stood up. She took a breath, steeling herself. She unlocked the door and opened it. Victor Rinaldi stood there. He looked older than she remembered. His hair was thinner, gray at the temples, and his face was lined with the stress of a life spent looking over his shoulder. But his eyes were the same, flat, black, and devoid of humanity. "Hello, Leah," he said. His voice was like grinding gravel. He stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation. 2 of his men, large and silent, flanked the door outside, blocking the exit. Victor looked around the shabby room and sneered. "From a penthouse to a dump, you really do have a talent for downward mobility." "I am here," Elena said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. "I did what you asked. Now call off your men. Leave Dante Moretti alone." Victor laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You think you are in a position to negotiate? You stole from me. You humiliated me. You cost me millions. I paid for it," she said. "I have been running for 2 years. That was interest," Victor said. "Now you pay the principal." He stepped closer. Elena backed up until her legs hit the bed. "He's going to come for me," she warned. "Invoking Dante's name like a shield? Let him come," Victor said. "That is the plan. Sweetheart, you are the bait. I knew you would run if you thought you were saving him. You always did have a bleeding heart. That is why you were so easy to break the first time." The realization washed over Elena. He had not just found her. He had engineered this. He knew she would leave to prevent a war. And by leaving, she had given him exactly what he needed to start one. "You are a monster," she whispered, her eyes blazing with hatred. Victor smiled, a cruel twisting of his lips. He reached out and grabbed her jaw. His fingers dug into her cheeks, hard enough to bruise. "And you are mine," he hissed. She stiffened, refusing to flinch, refusing to give him the satisfaction of her tears. She glared at him, pouring every ounce of her contempt into her gaze. "Get her out of here," Victor ordered. Shoving her backward, "Take her to the docks. We will finish this where it started." One of the guards stepped in, grabbing Elena's arm roughly. She stumbled but found her footing, walking out with her head held high, even as her heart hammered a rhythm of pure terror against her ribs. Dante's armored SUV tore through the streets, ignoring red lights and speed limits. Luca was driving, his knuckles white on the wheel. Dante sat in the back, staring at the tablet that tracked the GPS dot of Elena's phone. The dot had moved. It was no longer at the motel. It was moving east, toward the industrial district, toward the water. "They have her," Dante said, his voice devoid of emotion. "We are 5 minutes behind," Luca said. "We can call in the police. An anonymous tip." "No police," Dante said. "This is personal." He looked out the window at the blurring city lights. His fists were clenched so tight his fingernails dug into his palms. He replayed every moment he had spent with her. He saw her on the ladder, the fear in her eyes. He saw her in the kitchen, bandaging her hand. He felt the phantom warmth of her body against his when he shielded her from the shelf. But the memory that gripped him hardest, the one that made his chest ache with a physical pain, was from a week ago. She had been laughing at something the chef said, a rare, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes and lit up the cold, sterile penthouse like a sunrise. In that moment, he had not seen a cleaning lady, or a fugitive, or a problem to be solved. He had seen the only thing in the world that made sense. He realized, with a jolt that shook him to his core, that he was not just protecting an employee. He was not just defending his honor. He was in love with her. He loved her quiet strength. He loved her resilience. He loved the way she tried to save everyone but herself. And now, she was in the hands of a man who wanted to destroy her. "Drive faster," Dante ordered, his voice cracking with the intensity of his rage. The warehouse complex at the docks was a labyrinth of rusted shipping containers and corrugated metal sheds. The ocean crashed against the pilings, a rhythmic, violent sound in the darkness. Victor's convoy had stopped near the main warehouse. Dante's SUV screeched to a halt 100 yards away, hidden by a stack of crates. 2 other cars pulled up behind them, disgorging a dozen of Dante's best men. They were heavily armed, moving with the silent precision of soldiers. Luca turned to Dante. "Boss, this is a setup. He knows we are coming. Let me take the team in. You stay here." "No," Dante said. He opened the door and stepped out into the night air. It smelled of salt and diesel fuel. He adjusted his suit jacket, buttoning it with calm, deliberate movements. He checked the gun holstered beneath his arm, but he did not draw it. "He is expecting a commander," Dante said. "I am going to give him a king." "But Dante, stay on the perimeter," Dante commanded. "Wait for my signal. If things go south, your only priority is getting her out. Do you understand? Getting her out." Luca hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." Dante turned and walked toward the warehouse. He walked alone. His footsteps echoed on the cracked pavement. He did not crouch. He did not hide. He walked straight down the center of the path, a solitary figure moving into the darkness to face the devil, willing to burn his entire empire to ash if it meant saving the woman he loved. The warehouse smelled of brine, rusted iron, and old fear. Elena sat on a wooden chair in the center of a small, windowless storage room, her wrists bound in front of her with heavy zip ties. They were tight enough to chafe, but loose enough that she could twist her hands. A small mercy she suspected was accidental. Outside the thin metal walls, the ocean crashed against the pilings of the dock, a rhythmic, violent thud that masked the sound of her own ragged breathing. But it could not mask the sound of the heavy steel doors rolling open in the main bay, nor the echo of footsteps that followed. Elena froze, her head cocked to the side. "Victor!" A voice called out. It was a voice she knew better than her own heartbeat. It was deep, resonant, and deceptively calm. Dante. Her heart twisted in her chest, a painful knot of relief and devastation. She had run to save him from this. She had walked into the lion's den so he would not have to bleed for her. And yet, he had come. He had come into the darkness for her. She heard Victor's laugh, dry and scratching like sandpaper. "You actually came," Victor shouted back, his voice echoing through the vast, empty space. "And here I thought you were a businessman. Moretti. Since when do businessmen make bad investments? Since you took something that belongs to me," Dante replied. The sound of his voice drawing closer made Elena squeeze her eyes shut. "Go back," she screamed silently. "Please, just go back." In the main cavern of the warehouse, shadows stretched long and distorted under the flickering halogen lights. Dante stood near the entrance, his silhouette cut sharp against the gray night outside. He was alone in the center of the aisle, though the darkness behind him bristled with the presence of his men. 50 feet away, Victor Rinaldi stood on a raised metal walkway, flanked by 4 armed guards. Below him, scattered among the crates and forklifts, more of his crew held positions, their weapons trained on Dante's chest. Victor leaned over the railing, a cruel smile playing on his lips. He looked like a king of a decaying kingdom, desperate and dangerous. "I do not have your property." "Dante," Victor sneered, "I have a traitor, a little rat who bit the hand that fed her. And you are risking your entire empire for her, for a cleaning girl? It is pathetic." Dante took a step forward. His face was stone, but his eyes were burning coals. "Your days of owning people are over. Victor, she is not a rat, and she is certainly not yours." "She is whatever I say she is," Victor shouted, his composure cracking. "She cost me millions. She sent my brother to prison. And you think you can just walk in here and take her back because you wear a nice suit?" "I am not here to take her," Dante said, his voice dropping to a register that carried more weight than a scream. "I am here to end this." Victor straightened up, signaling to one of his men. "You want to end it? Fine. Let us make a deal. I am a reasonable man." Victor pointed a finger at Dante. "You want the girl? She is yours. But I want the South Side distribution routes, and I want $5 million in cash, delivered by morning. You give me the territory and the money, and you can take your little broken toy home." Dante paused. He looked at the men pointing guns at him. He looked at Victor. He appeared to consider it, stepping slowly closer to the center of the room. "Show her to me," Dante said. Victor nodded to a heavy door beneath the walkway. "Bring her out!" The door burst open. A burly guard shoved Elena out into the light. She stumbled, nearly falling, but caught herself. She looked wild, her hair matted, a bruise blooming on her cheekbone, her hands bound before her. "Elena!" Dante's composure fractured for a fraction of a second. She looked up. Across the dusty, debris-littered floor. Their eyes locked. In that gaze, there was no room for lies. Elena saw the terror he had buried deep beneath his armor. She saw the rage, but mostly, she saw the love that had driven him to walk into a trap, and he saw her strength, her defiance, and the silent plea for him to survive. The emotion between them was palpable, a live wire tension that made the air hum. Dante looked back up at Victor. "I see her," Dante said. "Do we have a deal?" Victor asked, leaning forward eagerly. "Territory for the girl. It is a fair trade." Dante reached into his jacket pocket. Every gun in the room clicked off safety, but Dante did not pull a weapon. He pulled out a small, silver flash drive. "No deal," Dante said. Victor's face fell. "What is that? This," Dante said, holding the drive up to the light, "is every transaction you have made in the last 10 years, every bribe to a city official, every shipment of narcotics, every name in your network. It is enough to put you and every man standing with you in federal prison for the rest of your natural lives." The silence in the warehouse was deafening. Dante continued, his voice steady. "I am not giving you territory. Victor, I am giving you a choice. Release Elena. Walk away from this city tonight and never come back. If you do, I destroy this drive. If you do not, I give it to the FBI agents who are currently waiting for my signal 3 blocks away." Victor went pale. He stared at the silver drive, the realization dawning on him that Dante had not come to fight a war. He had come to execute a coup. "You are bluffing," Victor snarled, gripping the railing. "You would go down with me. You are in those files, too. I scrubbed my name years ago," Dante lied smoothly. "But yours is on every page." Victor looked at his men. He saw the doubt in their eyes. They knew prison was a certainty if that drive was real. "Boss?" one of the guards muttered nervously. "Shut up!" Victor screamed. He turned back to Dante, his face purple with rage. "You think you can corner me? I built this city. I am not leaving." Victor raised his hand. "Kill him! Wait!" the nervous guard yelled, panicking. The guard's finger slipped on the trigger of his automatic rifle. A shot rang out. It went wide, sparking against a steel pillar, but it broke the dam. The warehouse exploded into violence. Dante threw himself behind a stack of shipping pallets as the air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire. Victor's men on the walkway opened fire on the entrance. Dante's men, positioned in the shadows, returned fire with disciplined precision. "Get her out!" Dante roared into his radio. "Get Elena!" Elena dropped to the floor the moment the first shot was fired. She scrambled on her hands and knees, crawling behind a thick concrete pillar. Bullets splintered the wood of the crates above her, raining splinters down on her hair. She pressed her back against the concrete, squeezing her eyes shut, her heart hammering against her ribs like a sledgehammer. The noise was unbearable. "Elena!" She opened her eyes. Dante was moving toward her. He was darting between cover, ignoring the bullets kicking up dust around his feet. He was 50 feet away, then 30. A gunman on the walkway tracked him. "Dante!" Elena screamed. Dante dove as a spray of bullets chewed up the floor where he had just been standing. He groaned, stumbling as he came up. A bright red stain was blossoming on the white shirt at his side. He was hit. "No," Elena whispered. She looked around frantically. A few feet away, the guard who had dragged her out lay motionless, taken down in the first volley. His handgun lay on the concrete, just out of her reach. Elena did not think. She did not weigh the options. She lunged. She threw herself out from behind the pillar, her bound hands snatching the heavy weapon from the cold floor. She rolled onto her back just as she saw movement to her left. A man, one of Victor's loyalists, had flanked Dante's position. He was raising a shotgun, aiming directly at Dante's exposed back. Dante did not see him. Elena gripped the gun with both hands. Her arms shook violently. She'd never fired a gun in her life, but she knew where to point it. "Dante!" She screamed his name again, a raw, primal sound. The loyalist turned toward her. Elena squeezed the trigger. The gun kicked hard, bruising her wrists, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. She missed the man, but the bullet sparked against the metal crate right beside his head. The man flinched, diving for cover, his shot going wide. The distraction was enough. Dante spun around, saw the threat, and neutralized it with 2 precise shots from his own weapon. He looked at Elena, his eyes wide with shock and awe. He sprinted the last 10 feet, sliding to his knees beside her. He grabbed her, pulling her behind the cover of a massive generator. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his hands checking her frantically. "I am fine," she gasped, dropping the gun. "You are bleeding." Dante ignored the wound in his side. He cupped her face with his bloodied hand, his thumb wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. The chaos of the gunfight raged around them, but in this small shadow, there was only them. "I am sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "I am so sorry I did not tell you sooner. I should have been honest. Dante, we have to go," she pleaded, gripping his forearm. "You are not a pawn." "Elena," he said fiercely, his eyes locking onto hers. "You are everything, and I will not let you pay for my sins. Not today. Not ever." Elena looked at him, seeing the vulnerability in the man who was supposed to be invincible. Tears welled in her eyes. "I do not want to lose you," she whispered. "You will not," Dante vowed. He peeked over the generator. The gunfire was dying down. Sirens, loud, wailing sirens, were approaching from the street. "The police," Dante said. "Right on time. On the walkway." Victor heard the sirens too. His face went white. He realized, too late, that he had been outplayed. Dante had not just brought a gun to a knife fight. He had brought the entire justice system. "We are leaving!" Victor screamed, turning to run toward the rear exit. "It is over! Victor!" Dante shouted, standing up. Dante's men had secured the ground floor. Victor was trapped on the walkway. The rear doors burst open. But it was not Victor's getaway driver. It was a SWAT team, their tactical lights cutting through the gloom. "Victor Rinaldi, drop your weapon," a voice boomed over a megaphone. Victor froze. He looked at the police. He looked down at Dante, who stood with his arm around Elena, shielding her. Victor roared in frustration, a sound of pure, impotent rage. He raised his gun, not to surrender, but to fire one last desperate shot at the man who had beaten him. A single shot rang out from the police marksman. Victor's gun clattered to the metal grating. He collapsed, his reign ending not with a bang, but with the cold efficiency of the law he had spent his life mocking. Dante pulled Elena's face into his chest, covering her ears, sparing her the sight of the end. "It is done," he whispered into her hair. "It is done." The aftermath was a blur of flashing red and blue lights. Dante refused to get into the ambulance until his lawyers arrived. They swept onto the scene like a flock of expensive crows, flanked by a city official Dante had helped elect years ago. Elena sat in the back of an EMT van, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching Dante speak to the police captain. He was bleeding, his shirt ruined, but he stood tall. She watched as he handed the silver flash drive to the captain. She watched the captain nod, a look of grim respect on his face. Dante walked over to her. He moved stiffly, his hand pressing a bandage to his side. He sat on the bumper of the ambulance beside her. "What did you do?" she asked softly. "I made a trade," Dante said, looking at the police cars taking Victor's men away. "I gave them Rinaldi's entire network, and I agreed to step back." "Step back? From the life," Dante said. "From the parts of it that cast shadows. I am keeping the legitimate businesses. Construction, real estate, shipping, but the rest I am trading for leniency and for a future." He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "A future where I do not have to worry about bullets coming through my window. A future where you are safe." Elena looked at him. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. The private clinic was quiet, a world away from the noise of the docks. The room smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Dante was asleep. The doctors had stitched his side and given him painkillers that finally knocked him out. He lay against the white pillows, looking peaceful for the first time since Elena had met him. She sat in the chair beside the bed. She had showered and changed into clean clothes, but she still felt the phantom weight of the ropes on her wrists. She stood up and leaned over him. She reached out and smoothed a lock of dark hair back from his forehead. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the rough stubble scratching her skin. Dante stirred. His lashes fluttered, and then his dark eyes opened. They were hazy at first. Then they focused on her face. "Elena," he rasped. "I am here," she said softly. He tried to sit up, wincing. "Stay still," she commanded gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You were shot, remember?" "I remember you saving my life," he murmured. "You have a terrible aim, by the way." "I hit the crate." She smiled, a genuine, tired smile. It worked. Dante's expression turned serious. He reached for her hand, his grip weak but insistent. "You can go," he said. "Rinaldi is gone. You are free, Elena. If you want to leave, if you want to start over, somewhere else, I will make it happen. You have enough money to go anywhere." Elena looked at their joined hands. She thought about the bus station. She thought about the lonely apartment with the thin walls. She thought about the fear that had been her constant companion for 2 years. And then she looked at the man who had walked into a warehouse of armed men just to bring her home. "I am tired of running. Dante," she said. She sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle him. "I spent 2 years letting fear make my choices for me. Fear told me where to live. Fear told me who to be." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I want to make a choice based on what I want, not what I am afraid of." "And what do you want?" Dante asked, his breath hitching. "I want to choose who I love," she said, "and I choose you." Dante let out a breath that sounded like a prayer. He pulled on her hand, tugging her gently closer. "Come here," he whispered. Elena shifted, perching on the mattress. She leaned down. Their lips met. It was not like the kiss in the penthouse, fueled by desperation and adrenaline. This kiss was slow. It was unhurried. It was the kiss of 2 people who knew they had all the time in the world. Dante's lips were warm and soft. Elena closed her eyes, melting into the contact. She felt his hand come up to rest on her waist, his touch careful and reverent. She rested her hands lightly on his chest, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart under the bandages. It was a tender embrace, an intimacy that went deeper than skin. It was a silent vow. I see you. I know you. I am yours. 6 months later, the penthouse looked different. The cold, museum-quality perfection was gone. There were books on the coffee table that had actually been read. There was a soft throw blanket draped over the sofa. There was a vase of fresh wildflowers on the dining table. Not an expensive arrangement from a florist, but flowers Elena had bought from the market. Dante stood at the full-length window, looking out at the glittering grid of Ravello City. He wore a suit, but the tie was gone. The collar open, he looked lighter. The weight of a double life lifted from his shoulders. He heard the soft pad of footsteps behind him. Elena walked up to him. She was dressed in a sleek evening gown. They had just returned from a charity gala. She had spent the evening speaking to donors about the new foundation she was managing, a shelter and legal aid fund for women escaping exploitation. She looked radiant. Confidence had replaced the fear in her posture. She stepped in front of him, leaning her back against his chest. Dante's arms wrapped around her immediately, an instinctive motion. He rested his chin on the top of her head. They looked at their reflection in the glass. 2 figures, standing as one against the backdrop of the city. "What are you thinking?" Elena asked softly, watching his reflection. "I was thinking about the first time I saw you standing at this window," Dante said. "You looked like you wanted to fly away." "I did," she admitted. "I thought this city was a cage. And now?" She leaned back deeper into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him. She looked at the lights below, no longer seeing threats in the shadows, but simply life. "Now," she said. "It just looks like home." Dante tightened his hold on her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We have a lot of work to do," he murmured. "The foundation, the new construction contracts. It will not be easy." Elena turned in his arms to face him. She reached up, straightening his collar. "We do not need easy, Dante. We just need each other." Dante smiled, a true, open smile that reached his eyes. "Partners?" he asked. Elena kissed him, a soft seal on the promise. Partners. They turned back to the window, standing side by side, ready to face whatever morning brought to their city, together. Thank you so much for listening to She Worked Cleaning His Penthouse until the mafia boss realized she was running from someone. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Dante and Elena as much as I enjoyed writing it. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from in the world. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more emotional, realistic, and passionate tales. Don't forget to share your thoughts on the ending in the comments section. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next story.